Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone's here for the recovery update, because that's what you're about to see. Graham's reminded me that it's okay to recycle jokes. My name is Calvin Gates, and I'm the information officer for the recovery team. Up on stage we have Graham Watt, recovery manager, Councillor Thompson, representing the City of Grand Forks, and Chair Russell, representing the Regional District of Kootenay Boundary. We have, I'm going to say, a schwack of slides to go through. So we'll go through them first, and then we will have question period at the end, the same format as the other meetings. We'll have 2 roving microphones to come to you with your questions. And then we have a bunch of resource people, mainly scrolled away in the corner over here, who are available to answer anything from critical infrastructure to housing, and of course to political questions. So to start off, we can get the next slide. This is the gist of our slide deck before we go to questions. So we have quite a few external organizations that want to keep you in the loop about what they're doing on the recovery side. And we will be starting off with Alina from the Red Cross. And don't be afraid to give her a round, she looks a little shy.
Can we go to... So hi everyone, my name is Alina Konevsky. I'm the recovery manager for the Red Cross for the flood operation in Grand Forks. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of an update. We just had our 3-month report released, so I'm actually able to share some very exciting figures with you, and I wanted to take that opportunity, and I thank you for the time. And I put everything up here. So we've got, so just a summary, you know, we've been in town since, I'm actually not sure of the exact date, but about May or June, so we've been here for a while. We have had 808 households registered with us for support. We've distributed financial assistance to over 700 people. We've distributed 788 cleanup kits. We've had 1.2 shelters going. We also had 2 reception centers going at one point. We've brought in 190 volunteers to support this operation throughout the whole time that we've been here, which is huge. And whoever among you are volunteers, we're profoundly grateful. And the final number, generous Canadians have donated more than $1.2 million towards our response to the BC flooding. Yeah, that's been great. Can we go to the next slide, please? So how we're using those funds? We've got 2 new programs that just launched this month, and then the final portion is our ongoing support to households impacted by the flood. So the first program that went out early September, and it's got a deadline of 5th of October, is called Support to Small Business, and it's a grant program. It's an online application process. It's pretty straightforward. If you are a business owner, or if you run a nonprofit organization, you're also eligible to apply, and you had some impact from the flood. It could be financial impact, it could be, you know, you had a greater draw on your services if you're a nonprofit due to the event, all kinds of things. Go ahead, I encourage you to apply online, and that's $1,500 just to help you on your way a little bit. The second program that was just launched a few days ago is called Community Partnerships Program. It's a project, it's a grant program for eligible not-for-profit organizations and community groups, and in some cases, school boards and municipalities can apply as well. It's a larger scale program where you get creative with your application, and there's no maximum amount to apply for, and there's no deadline, but we encourage people to submit their application sooner rather than later. For this one, if you are running a not-for-profit or you know somebody who is, please pass along that information and encourage them to get a hold of us. So there's email address right there, bccommunitypartners@redcross.ca. Contact us and we'll have a chat about what your idea is and whether we think that it might work and how to tailor it so that it does work and suit the community. So this is all to support ongoing and new and exciting flood recovery efforts in the community. That's what we're here for. And then the final program is our ongoing support to individuals and families affected by the flood. Most of you know our programming on that. And if you would like to continue to have that conversation with us, we are always available. Give us a call or drop by in the basement of the Legion. That's where we are for now. Yeah, and so I've got flyers for the first 2 programs as well, and just come find me after the event if you've got specific questions, and I'll stick around. Thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Alina. Now we're going to hear from Jim Guido. He's from the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development. All one giant acronym, one super ministry, and he's going to tell you about the outreach they're doing right now for Section 11 in-stream applications and anything else that he has going on.
Okay. So at the last meeting, I just did a really quick at the end of the meeting statement about the outreach that we're putting on. So what it is, it's Section 11 of the Water Sustainability Act requires that if you're doing any work inside of the top of bank of a stream, then you need approval or at least notification on that. So for anyone who is maybe out of the city or rural properties or just adjacent where you do have some questions about doing works in a stream, then you can call the Service BC office, 442-4306, but it's Gina in Service BC. Their office is open now, and they're doing all the scheduling for the appointments for us. So the second session is starting next week. The fellow comes from Cranbrook. He'll be here around 2 o'clock on Monday, and he will be here until the afternoon on Thursday if there's enough people that are looking for advice. We might try and get one of those days in Christian Valley, Rock Creek, West Bridge area. I don't know if there's any of those people here, so one of those days might be pulled for the Up the Valley folks to help them out as well. So it's the fellow from Cranbrook that processes these. He's got the computer there. He'll help you with mapping. When you call Service BC, they'll give you a bit of a brochure that's got a list of the information that if you bring with you, then you'll be better prepared to maybe get to an application where you can get it submitted. So title, legal description, legal name, map, a plan of what you would like to do as best as you have it in mind, or a plan done by someone else. So that second session is happening next week, and if any of you've got any questions, call Service BC, and they will give you the flyer that gives you the information. They will also have my contact information and also Christina Anderson's information. She's still doing site visits to give people advice on what sort of works or what kind of authorization you need for the kind of works that you're interested in. So that's pretty well it. We are looking, we've got a funding request in to have an overview assessment done of some of the possibilities for the type of work to be done, and we're still, that's pending right now. Hopefully we'll have someone that can do a little bit of an overview for the drainage to help you folks out that want to do some work. So that's basically it. Hopefully you take that opportunity next week.
Jim, Kevin has also posted the information for the Section 11s on the Boundary Flood Recovery website.
Yes, very good. It's there.
Yeah, so for those of you that didn't hear, the information for Section 11 applications, bfre.ca, and there's a post with the information for the outreach in terms of when it is and where it is and the phone number that Jim mentioned, as well as the background documents for your perusal before your appointment. All right, thank you, Jim.
Okay.
Before you sit down, Jim, can I ask you to speak a little more to that last piece, because I think there's a lot of people that are looking for clarity on whether or when we could expect to see the potential to have some kind of qualified professional come in and assess a broader scale that reaches, so that each of the private landowners aren't on the hook for their hiring their own professional.
Okay, the way we've made a request through Emergency Management BC or within voted funds of the ministry, and we're sort of taking those both approaches. So on some applications, but not all of them, if there's works in the stream that are of a complex nature, putting riprap to anchor it into the toe of the bank so it's durable at future water levels, or sometimes there's structures that need an engineering design. So, and that just depends on everybody's individual circumstance. So what our intent is with this qualified professional that we are looking to get funding for to hire is to do a broader overview and give some general recommendations on stretches of river that are what we're calling areas of concern, those that could possibly have a number of adjacent residents, and to coordinate those activities so that one person doesn't do work that impacts on the adjacent property, because there's often impacts from protecting banks. So we're looking at a broad level plan, something that the individual applicants can refer to and get them at least started in the process. And in some cases, we're hoping that generalized plan will be enough for the application if it's a relatively simple design. And then if there is further engineering work required, then the site-specific engineer can look at the general plan and maybe be more efficient in their specific design. So that's the plan. It's still a bit conceptual until we get the person out there, look at all the reports that have been done already as background information, the Dobson report, etc., and then give us a site-specific or a generalized description of those works that might work to stabilize the banks. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I'll get two microphones going here. So just quick show of hands, how many folks are considering in-stream works like riprap or putting up some sort of berm on their property, or know someone who is considering that? So I'd say about, approaching 10 in the audience tonight. So, and how many of you folks have already done your Section 11 application or are in process? Okay, right on. So feel free to approach Jim after the meeting if you haven't started already, and he can set you in the right direction, at least for signing up for the outreach next week. All right, and without any other gaps, we have the one, the only Mr. Graham Watt, recovery manager, and he is going to lead us through the next section here, which we could get the next slide. Oh, sorry, I'm wrong. I'm totally 100% wrong. Okay, well, there's two of Roly, so not the one and only. Nope, maybe it just seems like there's two of him. Roly's going to walk us through a brief update on the communications and roles and where things are kind of jammed up. So, Roly.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. And I guess partly, I did want to reiterate that, as some of you know, I have two hats here, right? So I'm up here as the chair of the regional district. I will speak wearing my other hat in a little bit as the representative for Rural Grand Forks. And mainly what I wanted to do is give people an update on what went on last week. Last week we had a very busy week, both a number of the city council from the municipality of Grand Forks, as well as myself, Graham Watt, the CAOs. We were down in Whistler having a lot of conversations with a number of bureaucrats and a number of ministers about the issues that we're having here. And so to frame where those different pieces fit, I just want to remind you, so this, what you see up there is kind of a bit of a sketch of the recovery model that we built. So we built this model to really leverage our local capacity and try to build capacity in our community to have long-term sustained solutions. And that involved this scenario that you've heard about before in terms of looking at pieces like critical infrastructure that is predominantly run by the City of Grand Forks, even though they're working in part in communities like Midway. The housing piece, which is primarily at this point being led by Urban Matters. The economic piece, which is predominantly being led by is being led by Community Futures. The environmental piece, which is being led by the Kettle River Watershed Authority, and the wellness, social well-being piece, which is led by Boundary Individual Services Society.
I'm going to jump in here, Roly, and just say that the computer gremlins did erase
all of my
the text
words.
you had there.
That's okay. We can do it afterwards. And so the idea being that's our model for trying to deliver all these pieces. So this is to set you up. Can we move on to the next slide? You can skip forward until you get to the next actual slide. So there's the words. And then skip forward so a little more, one more. Okay, that's probably good. So this is our breakdown. So looking at those different pillars. So looking at that critical infrastructure pillar, looking at housing, the economic piece, the social, environmental piece. Those are things, this is the same text that we had up in front of you weeks and weeks and weeks ago in terms of the projects that we were working on under these different key pillars of our recovery team. Those projects, on the whole, are still the same projects. None of this text has changed since you saw before. The layout looks a little different. But these are the pieces that are moving along as we would expect them to be, and we're seeing the pickup at either the provincial or federal level. Like on the far left, you see we have an application that federal disaster mitigation and adaptation fund. That's where it says DMAF. You know, those pieces are moving as we hope them to be. So they're not top of mind right now because we're not petitioning to see action on them. The split between the kind of higher up items and the lower down items here is just an indication of in each of these pillars, we have certain things that we're working on that are really immediate short-term needs that we need to deal with now, and certain pieces that we're trying to fix on a much more chronic, kind of longer-term framework, right? So like that DMAF proposal, the one on the far left and the bottom left of the text, is a huge package. That is the multi-million-dollar application that would help deliver a bunch of that critical infrastructure protection, so diking and so on and so forth across the region. And so, using this as a bit of framework, I want to identify, for example, we spent a lot of time last week, speaking with the Minister for Municipal Affairs and Housing and her team, so her deputy ministers and assistant deputy ministers, really focused on making sure that we have solutions in place before it's winter to give people that don't have appropriate housing prior to winter. Okay, so that was one of those conversations that we spent a lot of time on over the last week. Things like the economic piece, we met with, for example, the senior bureaucrats, or some of the senior bureaucrats from the Ministry of Agriculture, to make it clear to them that agriculture as an economic enterprise and part of the culture of our area is falling through the cracks, and there are not avenues that are coming to the table that they are being able to provide that they're fixing that problem, so that they're aware and that they recognize. We made it very clear on a number of these conversations, we don't have an answer from them, and we need an answer. So some of the question marks you see in the little red arrows there that Kevin so graciously added for me are recognizing that. We've put forward a number of these requests, for example, to help the agricultural producers. We just don't have an answer. And so if the answer is no at this point, we need to know what that answer is. So that was part of that conversation that we kept having over this last week, is to say, we need to know whether the answer is yes, great, that's what we would hope for. If the answer is no, that's okay, but you need to tell us. And if the answer is maybe and we're working on it, sure, then make sure we understand what the time frame is that we're looking at for answers like that. Do we have any help for those agricultural producers? And maybe the answer is going to be no, but we don't know that yet.
Would you actually accept no as an answer?
we can't move on to our next course of action until we know what that answer is. So it's not going to help us. This whole process, I would say, has revolved around an enormous amount of trust. So we have leveraged a great deal of the trust in our local organizations. So through organizations like Boundary Family Individual Service Society and through Community Futures and stuff to get a lot of this work done. That's predominantly relying on the trust that we have in our community to get this done. Likewise, we have had a lot of very productive partnerships with the province, and that is in large part because this is new territory and they do not know how to manage this a scale of a disaster like this, that it is built on a good partnership with them. Once they come back and say no to things, then we can decide what that next course of action is. Moving on, so things like the social Cuban, there was a conversation with the health minister to say, we recognize the importance of some of the models that they've been piloting in the Boundary for the patient medical home, kind of the system where they don't have just GPs sitting in offices in isolation. And so to thank them for some of those pieces that they have done, for example, or the Municipal Affairs and Housing, things that they have done to help us in some of those chronic situations, right? We had conversations with the Minister of Civic Affairs that deals with broadband to say we need to make sure that when we get into an emergency like this, we have coverage in our remote areas so that we can communicate emergency evacuation alerts and so on in areas where right now that is a huge challenge to do. We had a lot of conversations with Forest Lands Natural Resources, including the Provincial Disaster Recovery Branch and Emergency Management BC, with various combinations of those groups to highlight the parts of this process which are bottlenecks for us, which are friction points and which we're not getting action on. A lot of that has to do with those question marks in the red arrows. It's that notion that we have a very well-designed recovery team that is identifying the needs in our community, and we are bundling those up through our process and through our recovery manager, Rachael, and putting that on the table in that provincial conversation, and we don't know where some of those things are. And so we need clarity on that. So that was the sort of thing that we were making sure was clear to those representatives, whether that was the minister or assistant deputy minister, deputy ministers, all of those people heard those messages from us. We made it clear, for example, that the DFA is not working for businesses. Right? It's not working whether that is a downtown business, whether that is an agricultural business. It's simply not working. Either people are too small, or they're too big, or for whatever reason they're not eligible. We challenge some of their provincial interpretation on DFA to say this ought to be eligible, and why isn't it eligible? And so I think that's and then with the city of Grand Forks, we met with the premier as well, and we made it clear, the number one piece, coming back to the beginning, is from my perspective, with that conversation with him, was to say, all these things, we have millions and millions of dollars of proposals in front of you that we have needs clearly identified. We've given you all the data. We need to hear those answers. But the number one piece that we need action on this week that we have not yet heard is we need to make sure everybody has a house for this winter. So I think that's all that I need to speak to on that piece. When we get to questions, I'm happy to take questions. And so if I could have the next slide, please. So to briefly take off my chair's hat for a moment and put on my hat as the elected representative for rural Grand Forks. I want to apologize, I guess, for, I think, part of the communication around what we're doing for the areas outside of the city has been a problem. And I recognize that people want to know more. We are trying to do all of these things, and sometimes we're not maybe taking the time that we need to communicate back to everybody. And I want to reiterate that the position for this flood did not abide by political boundaries, and likewise the solutions that we are talking about and the advocacy that we have at the provincial level is not bound by political boundaries. And so whatever kind of solutions that we're talking about, that you hear us talking about, in terms of the City of Grand Forks making a commitment to pursue funding to assist with relocating homes or an attempt to pursue funding to assist with elevation of homes, those are exactly the same thing that we are doing for the rural areas. Whether that is my constituency, whether that is up the Christian Valley, it is the same approach. And so I know that hasn't been clear. It's been clear in our minds, I think, for a long time. But that point I want to reiterate. So if there is a petition to, that package of requests that we're putting forward to say we would like to get funding to help raise those homes that were under a massive amount of water, or a significant amount of water, I should say, then that same request applies when we are going to petition for neighborhoods like the Darcy Road neighborhood or the nursery area, okay? So it's the same process. We just haven't maybe communicated that as clearly as we should. If there is a process where we're gonna look to try to identify opportunities for land swaps or other options to relocate, we would do that for those massively flooded homes anywhere in the flood. It doesn't matter if you are in the city of Grand Forks or outside of that, it will be the same approach. And likewise with amendments to zoning and so on, for us in the rural areas, we need to wait until we see the updated floodplain mapping and the assessment of where those high-risk areas are, and that is when we would expect to see any potential changes to zoning that would go forward. That being said, I think in most of the rural areas, so outside of that confluence area of the Granby and the Kettle specifically, most of our zoning has proven to be quite effective in terms of those floodplain covenants and the restrictions on the construction. So, again, happy to take more questions about that after.
Thank you, Roly. So while we're still on this slide, there's just a couple things I wanted to point out thinking about the regional picture. One of them is that if you notice there's a dot up in Greenwood and a couple dots down in Midway, so in this area right here, there's some critical infrastructure issues that our team from Grand Forks has been working on, including looking at the berm and looking at an isolated house in Greenwood, and then looking at water and sewer infrastructure crossings at Boundary Creek and Greenwood. A slide that you'll see in a few moments looks at some of the breakdown of households affected by urban and rural neighborhood, folks that are currently needing housing for the winter. So we're dealing one-on-one with a lot of people, and we're looking at some opportunities for outreach specifically to some of the rural neighborhoods where it'd be worthwhile talking to a number of households at once. So I guess Director Russell for this area and Director G in the west and McGregor at Christina Lake, we've been talking about some options for what's next on there. The decision framework has slightly different implications than the city, but also is just important as indicated. Next slide. Perfect. All right, so there's a few slides coming up here, a little bit on the immediate housing needs, where we've got a bunch of data from the housing outreach, and I'm actually going to ask Rachael to step up in a moment to speak to what we found, as she's been kind of the leading figure around all the data collection. We're also going to talk a little bit about the ask that's been put into the province, and kind of contingencies and stuff. The bottom line, right now, we recognize that it's getting cold. Typically, we start to see freezing temperatures in the first week of October, and then it gets colder and colder from there. We know that many people are in RVs or uninsulated or partially insulated homes, or still in that family couch surfing mode. So this is our utmost critical need, and it will become an emergency soon. So this is kind of where a lot of our focus is right now, and wanted to share where we're going with that. So next slide, and I'll pass this up to Rachael. So we can do combine the song and dance. And if you want to stay down here, I can point to stuff, and you can talk to it from down there. Just remember to face the camera, audience.
Oh, yeah.
Or go on stage? Yeah, better. Use the spotlight. There you go.
So we've been working really hard at trying to collect accurate data so that the picture that we're presenting to the province speaks as close to 100% as possible. So currently we have 62 households that need immediate housing. And so we've broken it down into families, seniors, singles, and couples. There's a couple different color blocks on there that I won't really go into, but you'll see that the single housing, we have 19 households that need housing. So going into the next couple of weeks, these are our priority that we're really trying to push hard and nicely to the government that we need support for this. And a lot of you have, come forward and said that you have, options and need help. And if you do have options out there, please call me and let me know. I'll have my number at the back and I can give you a card. But I just really want to thank you guys for putting up with my calling and leaving a lot of messages and having you guys call me back. And if you know of anybody that has not yet contacted us and they need housing, please have them call me because it's important. I personally don't want to see anybody in a situation this winter that maybe we could have helped with. And so that's my goal, is to be 100%. And I'm kind of funny that way, but really, if you know of somebody that has a need for housing that's been affected by the flood, please send them my way. And thank you for giving me information and for trusting me with your stories. I really appreciate it. So.
Thank you, and I wanted to thank Rachael and actually give her a huge round of applause. She's been absolutely tireless in bringing this information forward. We'll just skip over the next couple slides. The next slide, last stop right there, perfect. I just wanted to point out, we're talking about geographic distribution. These slides will be made available on the website after the event, so we'll be posting them so you'll be able to drill down into the data if you want. But we have downtown, North Ruckle, South Ruckle, Nursery and Edwards, Riverside, Highway 3, East Granby, Darcy, Johnson Flats, Almond Gardens. This is the urban and rural neighborhoods where people are still out of their homes or in inadequate housing because their rebuild timeline is taking so long. So this is a cross-area effort, but it really shows kind of the area of impact, and it lines up a lot with kind of the scale that was seen in the proposal from the engineer, the recommendations from the engineer, and the resolutions from council. Where the greatest impact often is also where we need to focus a lot of the effort on structural or looking at those high-risk kind of areas for further action. So the other piece that I wanted to look at is we really have been taking a lot of pains to understand what special circumstances people have that make it challenging around housing, whether it's mobility or mental health issues and that kind of stuff. And the outreach team has been working closely with Boundary Family Services around wellness issues that are facing people because of the housing challenges. So I really want to recognize that there's a whole caring team here to follow up, and we'll have a check-in at the end of the meeting about mental health as well from Margareta from the ministry. So yeah, will happen in a bit. Okay, next slide.
Graham.
Yes.
If those numbers, like when you see a 1, that means a household, not necessarily one person, right?
That's correct. It's a household, and the range of households are anywhere from 1 person to 4 or 5.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm not going to go through all the details. Once again, this will be live on the web and also in the presentation, pausing. But the key points in here is that there's a huge amount of work that's been undertaken around everything from the resolutions from council, the UBCM meetings, further implementation of the Red Cross programs that we heard about earlier, long-term solutions from BC Housing. There's a whole flurry of work happening, and it's great to see all the progress. And just thinking of the progress, that helps me when I look at the areas that we still have a lot of challenges. So next slide, please. The key, as Roly talked about, we talked with UBCM with cabinet ministers, senior staff, deputy ministers, assistant deputy ministers, about what kind of support is needed. We gave them the information that we have, and we've been asking about that continued work. So essentially, it involves everything from continuing for a transition period, more of the Household Emergency Assistance Program, looking at that big grant application and providing provincial support for the federal ask. And, you know, how do we actually use recovery funding as an investment in the future in Grand Forks? So evolving towards, you know, new opportunities. That's kind of, and I would say that a lot of folks are really receptive to that concept, and that's definitely helping us. So next slide. I might ask Paul Edmonds to come up and speak to a couple slides here about the strategies that we're working on, and then step into housing after that. Paul Edmonds, I don't know what to call him, but he's a consultant on risk assessment and advanced planning. So is that CRISPy, or anyways, we've got an acronym for you. Paul comes with considerable experience in flood management, disaster management, mitigation, and he's helping us out with strategic planning here.
Yeah, perhaps it's more shiny with the light there. What we need to do with it, every incident and every recovery, we need to know where we're going. We need to know the path that we're going down. So this is sort of the first start of it. This is my third week in Grand Forks. So we're putting a strategy in place so that we know what our priorities are. And if you have any comments about strategies or about the housing or the environment, you know, please come back to us and the team leads, and we can discuss where we're going. Because without you, we're not going anywhere. So the strategy is all emphasis around the community, Grand Forks, the rural areas, what's been affected by the flooding. Just going through the bold, really. Public safety is always our number one paramount principle for strategy. We have to make sure the public is safe, and as has come through today, the immediate housing need is our number one priority. Winter is coming. We need to put in place permanent solutions. Working in British Columbia, from my background from the UK, I always had a remit with mitigation. I could always go into an incident and put things in place that would stop or mitigate something from happening before. British Columbia is not there at the moment, but we have the Premier actually saying, please put in permanent solutions. So we have to look at this as an opportunity to move forward in the community. And when large floods has happened previously all across the world, and wherever the community has grabbed the opportunity to create something better, we have come out on top. Got a much better cohesive community and a much more resilient, whether it's engineering, and we can talk about engineering, whether it's rightly or wrongly in the right areas or the wrong areas, but creating the community, the resilient community for the future, will actually bring people commerce and bring people through to Grand Forks and the surrounding area to Cooley boundary. Resumption of a new life. Every time there is an incident, I am amazed how humans are so resilient. And we have to look at the sustainable options to make sure that we get people back on track, back to the workplace, back to being enjoying the community, not just surviving in the community. Always with all sorts of incidents, there's always consequences on the environment, and we have to restore to the natural environment, whether it's fridges or trucks that's been washed down the river, contaminations. We need to try and restore that to the new normality as well. The economic growth, without people living in towns, without people spending money in towns and rural areas, you're not going to get the economy. So the economy makes the region whole. Obviously, we talked about communication today and where we need to improve, but communication and stakeholders is so important going forward that we get the right messages to you. As you can see, it's to the public first, business, media, and then the governments. We always tend to write it to the public first. The government is being paid to do the job, so they're always a stakeholder, but the public, we need to engage a lot more. That's, I think, my little segue. We're going to go to housing. Emily, next slide, please. And you've got to come on stage as well.
Thanks.
So, Rachael did a good job at speaking to our graphs. I just wanted to clarify that it was the numbers on this axis that actually made it a little bit more than 19, I think it was 25.
Sorry, Emily, who are you?
Oh, thanks. Okay, well, don't worry, I'll introduce myself. I'm Emmeline, I'm the housing lead, and I had the opportunity to meet a few of you as you trickled into the auditorium, and I handed you a questionnaire. And it's actually something that I'm going to make sure that all of you get before you leave the meeting. And I'll speak to it in a few moments. Let's see. Can you go to the next slide? So as Paul said, our immediate focus goes to who needs housing for winter. So as of today, it was 63 households. That number might have gone down by a few households if I was eavesdropping on Rachel's phone calls correctly. This is our number one priority, and this has had our attention all week. We've been looking at the data, looking at the households, understanding their needs specific to each household. Some are going to have complex barriers, and it's about far more than just finding shelter for them. Others have mobility considerations, and others are a bit easier. So once we understand the composition of the households, then we need to think about where are people actually going to go. And one of our priorities is to focus our solutions within Grand Forks, so that we're not bringing in out-of-town solutions that has recovery dollars leaving the community, because this community needs a lot more than temporary shelter right now. So we will ask, and we will ask, and we will ask again, and we will find new ways of asking for what we need. And that's what we spent time doing this week. We actually put in an EAF, an Emergency Assistance Fund application. And this was our ask. We needed a cushion, given the lag in time that we have originally, I've just come in here 3 weeks ago, but these asks have been in with the province for months. So given this lag in time, we've asked for an extension of the HEAT program so that we can implement our immediate solutions, so that people aren't left high and dry as we're setting up those immediate accommodations for winter. You're all able to read, except for the peanut gallery in the back there, who says he doesn't know how to read, but I don't believe him. We're gonna look to the local hotels and motels to set residents up. We're gonna look to ATCO trailers for residents who need to be located on their property. But then we're also gonna have an interim or a transition program, where we're going to look at available units for getting up to rental, like getting them prepared to be rented. So they might need some like minor repairs or fixes, but it's something that's going to be a lot more comfortable for the long term. So we understand that some of the rapid solutions that we might have to implement given the cold weather might be uncomfortable, and we understand that, and so we're going to try and get you into the best, most comfortable position so that you're safe, warm, and dry for the 6 months with this rental incentive program. So we're looking to develop underdeveloped suites and grow the existing rental stock within Grand Forks. Probably rambling a little bit because I'm a bit nervous. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, so when we're talking to people, sometimes it's something as simple as, my furnace isn't working, and I need a new furnace. And so the idea that we would bring in an ATCO trailer because their house isn't habitable it just doesn't make sense if all they need to do is fix their furnace. So part of our ask is to address those simple repairs that would allow people to stay in their home. We have a priority to move you as little as possible, to interrupt your life as little as possible, and to make sure that all options are on the table. There's no silly suggestion. Nothing is silly. So if you have an idea, if you have an option, anything that's out there, bring it to us. We're all ears. So now we'll talk to what I handed out at the beginning of the meeting. And I frame it like this. If you were to ask someone over and over and over again for something, no, it's not that. But it's right beside my seat there. Somebody wants to volunteer and hand it out.
Well, I didn't want to hand it out, but I just wanted to grab one.
Amazing. Oh, does anyone want to hand some out? Oh, yes! Volunteer. Amazing. So, yeah, just raise your hand if you need one. So, I remind myself that a community is going to recover the same way it's built, and that's together. So, as we wait for the province, we're not going to wait idly. We're going to look everywhere and identify any potential partner in recovery. That could be a not-for-profit, that could be an organization, that could be an individual. So I created this questionnaire. I bet you there's a typo or a spelling error, but I really want to capture potential partners in the recovery in the regional district. So if you have an idea of someone or yourself that has a role to play, I want you to write it down. I want you to take this home. I want you to think about it. I want you to fill it out. And then I'd like you to bring it to the RDKB office, if you would. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I should cover. Amazing. And it's only going to get more inclusive from here. So I'm going to ask you questions, and I'm going to find more and more questions to ask you, because I am looking to you to inform a lot of what we do. We might know how to engage on this from a very technical standpoint, but each community is going to be very unique in how they approach recovery. So thank you for the rambling bit.
Ellen has jumped right in with and hit the ground running. 3 weeks in here, massive productivity, so we're really moving forward quickly. Is Jennifer Wetmore here tonight? Yes, you are. Did you want to speak to anything on here, or are you comfortable with what's up there?
I can just speak to the work that we do.
Yeah, awesome. So Jennifer Wetmore from Boundary Community Features, or Community Features Boundary.
I'm not going on the stage. We have been very, very busy engaging with businesses since the event hit. We have produced, in consultation with the British Columbia Economic Development Association and with support from the province, a short-term economic recovery plan. We have conducted over 126 business impact assessments and produced a report that I am happy to make available to you with numbers that indicate a huge hit to the business community throughout this entire region. Very concerning, and as Roly has articulated, there are many sectors that we work with very closely, retail, agriculture, who have fallen between the cracks. We continue to advocate on their behalf with the province and through the recovery team. This week we have been busy conducting focus groups throughout the entire region again to turn our attention to a longer-term economic recovery strategy. We continue to push those through to various levels of government and push for support for our businesses. I want to thank the businesses, and I see many of you here tonight, who have continued to show up and offer their feedback, who have continued to reach out to me. You're in our thoughts and my thoughts absolutely every single day. So that's it.
Thank you. Some of this has been spoken to as well, but do you want to go to the next slide? And Jess, is there anything that you wanted to add about the environmental portfolio?
I'll go on stage.
Awesome.
Just for 1 minute. I'll just speak to a couple things. The debris assessment that was being done in the river is complete. So the truck you saw, there's some log jams that are causing problems for people where it's making that water come right at their property. There's a few of those that have been earmarked that we're going to be looking at taking those out over the next couple of months while we have the fish window where we can get in and do those in-stream works. We also have to apply for that Section 11, even as the regional district, and so that, you know, might pose a few challenges for us, just making sure that that's, we're meeting all the requirements as well. And we also have been working on the environmental survey. A lot of people were concerned about, you know, contaminants in their yard and moving back into their house, what was there. So that report is in draft, and we're just talking with the consultant that's doing that. We're hoping to bring him here in 2 weeks so that he can present those results himself. And that's one thing I want to mention. If you feel like you have a concern that hasn't been addressed, he's made some site visits to people's places. So if you would like him to come to your place and discuss any concerns that you have, he can still do that. So you can contact us at the Kettle River Watershed Authority, and we will lead you in the right direction. And then the last thing I think Jim mostly spoke to, it was the Section 11s. I'll just put in that I feel like we've tried to really help people as the local organization, as the Kettle River Watershed Authority. And I know that my team that I work with, Mike Tallis and Nicole McCallum, have gone to people's properties and met with people and tried to help them. And now it's so great that Christina Anderson is dedicated to this area as that authority that can sign off on those Section 11s that Jim was speaking about. And one I think is a great thing is that some of those have actually been signed off on, and we helped one fellow get his application in, and that has been signed off on, and he's able to start that work. So don't hesitate. If you're going to put that in, like, get going on that. You can make an appointment to meet with Barry, like Jim said, and I think that will help you get started, and then you can get hopefully to doing a bit of that work this fall.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, Jess. We see Mr. Darren Pratt in the room as well. He's there. Everyone is hiding in this spot.
There's no hiding.
No.
I'm there. I'm going to follow Jennifer's lead. No. So, I'd like to point out, and Chair Russell is kind of giving a lot of credit to my parent organization for kind of leading this. The community needs to understand that our working group is now composed of about 9 different agencies. We had a meeting today for 2.5 hours addressing wellness and unmet needs, and we heard the message very clearly. Everything hinges on housing. So while my pillar sits here and talks about nothing about us without us and meeting needs, we know without housing, nothing else really matters. And we had a couple of new partners come to the table at our meeting this afternoon with their lens from the medical model, saying that what they're seeing within their practices, within their doctor's offices, within emergency, that they know that the responsibility lies with us to create housing opportunity. So the pillar of wellness and unmet needs is just an addendum to the bigger working group. So where we're at is exactly where we're at with everybody else. Our initial ask to the province for case management and further support is tied to the bigger provincial ask. So we are in a holding pattern as well, just as Chair Russell mentioned. So we are hoping that when that funding comes up, we can then begin to kind of meet more expanded needs as they come available. As always, I have an open door policy. If anybody has any questions or comments, There's feedback. Every door is the right door. Whether it's your doctor, whether it's through adult mental health and addictions, child and youth mental health, if you have school-age children, you can access anything that you need through any of those portals. We are all connected. Thank you.
All right, so we're coming near towards the end. I'll pass it off to Margaret and Lynn in a moment, but bottom line, we're working with the province really closely to ensure support for people, not just the asks that have been put in, but just many points of collaboration that are happening that you see the folks that are here, and we're looking at how to make sure the supports are in place. The immediate emergency housing supports, we talked a bit about that tonight. The detailed applications for flood protection works, we anticipate that we'll be stepping into some major costing and engineering over the next 2 months. Going back to what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, this is kind of the first footstep of a very long 2 to 4 year time frame before we actually get to construction on those, but they need the detailed costing before any funding approvals are in place. And that includes costing around buyouts and exactly what areas are required for that. As we look ahead to that, we anticipate needing to engage on, working on the early preparation for the buyout and the transition program. So what factors need to be addressed? What are the local needs? The information that came out of your surveys that went out in August about how it could affect you. There's follow-up work that will need to happen in order to design that program well, and that will kind of need to go hand in hand with the engineering design for the flood protection works. And then as we move past that, before we get to installing any dikes and looking at transition of neighborhoods, what is that medium to long-term housing and business relocation strategy? Where are they going to go? Are there land, servicing, zoning issues that need to be addressed? That planning work is starting in the next few months as well. And another key point is that we're working closely with our larger parent agency, with the Regional Emergency Management Program in the city and the RDKB to do that advanced planning work for the 2019 flooding freshette, including communications, temporary structures, outreach. So we've heard you loud and clear. That's the link between recovery and next steps. So, thank you.
Thank you, Graham. That's a huge amount of work, and although it seems to be going slowly, there's many long days that have been put in. Now, if we go to the next slide, I'll invite Margaret up onto the stage to talk about the outreach that's going on right now in the boundary. Or just in front of the stage. We can save you the stairs.
I'll come. Thanks. Yeah, sorry I messed up my back this week, so I'm kind of like 100 overnight.
And if we can start with who you are, Margaret.
Yes, absolutely. I'm Margaret Lund, and I'm the Manager of Recovery for Health Emergency Management BC, and we are a part of the Health Authority. It's Provincial Health Services Authority, so we do all the more provincial programs like the BC Cancer Centres and renal, and we also have a disaster psychosocial team. You might have seen some of them in the early days. They call them kind of the purple shirts that come out. And you're going to see about a lot of these posters. I put up a few of them down here, posters, and also these cards. This is one of them, and it really is about how talking helps, and everybody has gone through horrendous time, and it is, if you're whatever you're feeling, you need to talk about it. So if you and your friends, so if you reach out to your friends, if you're needing to talk, or if you have people that maybe you haven't seen too much lately, and it's because they're staying in and maybe they're not feeling well. A lot of time we'll say, well, we better give them space. But a lot of time what they really need is you to get them out of the house, go for coffee, do something, reach out to them as well, because that isolation factor, we tend to do that a lot. So it's reaching out to others for help, but also to know that there is the crisis line, we're calling it's the support line as well. And it's free, it's confidential, you can call anytime, 24/7. and somebody will be there. And I've talked to them to make sure, I wanted to reassure you, you don't have to be in an absolute crisis to call. You can just be having a really bad time. So whether it's you're in bed or your friend's in bed and just can't get up because of the stress or depression this is causing, or you need to be diffused because you're ready to punch a hole in the wall at work and don't really want to do that, then you can call those people and they will help you decompress and walk through that. And it's so important. And I know, if you had all the money and everything was resolved tomorrow, you've still gone through what you've gone through, right? And it's you just can't erase that, and it needs to be acknowledged. And it's not a matter about some people are stronger than others. It's like how much can we really take? And also, we all are looking at, one of the previous slides talked about the new normal, and what the hell is the new normal for us in all of BC now, right? It really has changed, and we understand more now about what some other places seem to, go through some annual crisis. So we have to really work at building our own resilience, and that is going to be about, talking to one another especially, but reaching out when you do need help. We also have, and those support lines, they've had about over 3,600 calls.
You can point the mic at your mouth again.
Over 3,600 calls last year, and I know in the 2017, after the fires from Ashcroft up to Quesnel, they had a huge uptake in calls on those lines as well. We also have, there's a bounce back program that we've got some brochures on, and you can either go on the internet, online yourself for that. They've got a lot of do-it-yourself pieces with that, or also you can go to a doctor or even into the clinic, the mental health clinic. They can also give you referrals as well. And if you do get a referral, then they'll give you an interview, and then we'll fax in the information to the Canadian Mental Health Association, and they'll get back to you within 5 days, and it'll be a series of 4 to 6 kind of coach calls to walk you through some things. So that's another support for you as well. And even Anxiety BC, I went on that website, and they had some wonderful things on there too. So we just want you to recognize that whether it's you or your friend, to please kind of walk through the fear. It takes a lot of courage to ask for help, but it's probably the best thing that you can ever do. I know I've had struggle with depression on and off for a number of years, and being in emergency management for 25 years, I'm supposed to be one of the tough guys too. And every time I finally did reach out for help, I always said, why the heck didn't I do this a long time ago? And I had issues again in January 2017, and I just wasn't well, and I finally reached out and got some help. And it's amazing where one of my best friends, he was having a hard time, and we just didn't really get into it with one another. We kind of listened a bit, but we never want to say just how bad we are. And when he asked me, what are you doing? And I said, yeah, I did get help. And somehow, that just opened the door. It gave him permission. And he went and did get help. And he told me about 4 weeks or 6 weeks later, he said, that conversation, that actually saved my life. He said, I was ready. I didn't think I could go more than another couple of weeks before I was going to commit suicide. And then I realized, it's not just about me, that if I'm talking, you don't know how bad somebody else is hurting and how much that can actually save a life. So I don't want to, get into that too dramatically, but you guys have experienced, it's been big, and I'm worried about all these guys, and I'm worried about Rachael and all of that team. I mean, how long can they keep going with this? So I'm thinking we're going to get Andy or somebody back up here and have a talk just for those guys, so they can let off some steam and just you got to be able to diffuse. And So also, we're bugging, I'm part of the province, but I'm bugging them twice a week, every time, when they say, what's going on, Garden Trunks, what do you need? I say, give us the money, give us the money, give us the money. So, I'm happy, that's, and now they do say to me, well, okay, besides you want that money, what else is going on? And like Darren alluded to, we had a fabulous working group meeting today, and I'll tell you, those healthcare people locally, they were ready to go out and protest and, get a hammer and start building some housing. So a lot of caring people. So I've got lots of brochures, lots of goodies. Anybody come and see me afterwards. And also going down the line, we will be put on some sessions for you guys in town, and anything that you can think of that you think would be really beneficial, and whether that's how to help yourself and help others, whatever it is. If you've got an idea, something may help you, please come and let me know, and we can kind of look at getting that on the list over the next couple of months into, we'll be doing this for a couple of years. So please come and see me, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Margareta. We're now in question period, and we have until 8 o'clock, and it is now just after 7. So we'll, as usual, if there's a herd of questions at the end, we'll extend it a bit, but for now, we'll start with an 8 o'clock target and go from there. So on my right, so your left, we have the lovely Dave who has the microphone. So put your hand up, make eye contact, he will come to you, and I will be over on the left. We'll start with Dave so we can get out the first question.
Hi, Anne Myers from South Ruckle. I have a question for you, Dave. I know the program that litter is over, but the town has a low grade truck, and South Ruckle has a bunch of cars that need to be picked up. That's my question.
Okay, I'll be driving through there later this week to have a look and see what needs to be addressed there.
Okay, hi, I'm Dave Soroka with North Ruckle. Just a quick question about the buyout in North Ruckle. I want to get it clarified. I've had one councillor tell me that it's not expropriation, it's a buyout. So I want to know, is expropriation what we're looking at? Because it seems to me technically that's what it is. And if it's not, then the Expropriation Act doesn't apply, so what does? What are the rules and regulations that the city is obligated to follow? Is there some way that we could all be educated in this? Is it expropriation, first of all, yes or no?
No, we do not want to go the expropriation route unless we cannot come to an agreement, and then we would have to look at that. But that's a very ugly process, Dave,
Okay.
and we don't want to go there if we don't have to.
Okay, no, I get that. So it's called a buyout. It's not expropriation, it's a buyout. Where does that leave us? What are the legalities? Like, what's your lawyer telling you? Like, what are the laws here? What are the regulations in regards to a buyout as opposed to expropriation?
What we want to do is to negotiate with each property owner. We want to, and we advocated, and we have made both the Premier and the Doug Donaldson, Minister of Forest Lands, Natural Resources and Rural Development, abundantly clear of the direction and the endorsements that Council made on the 4th of September. And that is to buy you out at pre-flood market value and to reimburse you for any expenditures that you have made to remain in your house currently, but you would have to retain your receipts.
Right. Yeah, okay, I get that. So that's what you want to get us. The mayor has made it really clear that there are no guarantees. All I'm saying is, I guess at this point, like down here in North Ruckle, we're not sure what we should be, we're back in our house, me and her, for the winter. But we're faced with the prospect of what do we do? I mean, we're house hunting, but we're not quite sure what our budget is. What's the worst case scenario here for us in North Ruckle? What's the worst case? Are we gonna just lose our homes and get no money, or what's the worst case?
That would be the absolute worst case, but I don't believe that that's going to happen. The province heard us loud and clear what we are endorsing for our residents who are impacted by the flooding, with the loss of their homes. We went very well prepared with the resolutions that council endorsed. And one of the questions that the Premier asked is, well, how are you going to pay for this? And I said, that's where you come in. So they have to come to the table. Minister Donaldson was very complimentary on how well prepared that we went in with our asks and our additional information. We are hopeful, and if not, we will certainly be going back to the province that we're going to get an answer on some of this in the very short term. Because you all need to know what your options are and what you can do, and we can't make any promises, only what we're advocating for, and the province better get off their proverbial and step up to the plate so that you can get on with your lives.
One additional point, just to the original part of the question about what does it look like and the legalities and everything. So City did consult with the legal counsel just about how the process looks like. And what's clear from the very beginning is that additional outside expertise is needed in designing it. Some of that expertise comes from the province. They have lands branch that deals with lands dealings all the time. There's other people who deal with when there's highway developments and there needs to be properties purchased. There are people who work through these processes all the time in other communities. And, depending on the scope of the funding that's approved and the timeline, we want those people here as soon as possible to help design that process. They're the people that I think can provide the answers about exactly what the legalities are and providing clear communication about how the negotiation will proceed, and then, if required, what does the Expropriation Act and regulations provide. But that's kind of beyond us. We just know that it's a big deal, so we recognize that.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned the Expropriation Act. So. Yeah, okay.
It's the worst case scenario, but in some cases, when the province needs to build a new highway or when a dike gets constructed, in those areas, some people may not want to leave, and negotiation happens in good faith for as much as possible.
I get that. I've tried to read through that act, and it looks to me like it's sort of built in favor of the landowner. Protections in there as far as not getting too much of the raw end of the stick.
So maybe what we can request actually is that we can have an upcoming meeting, someone from the province to explain a bit about the process.
With the folks that are being bought out. It would be nice to
say specific.
Yeah. It's like we're laying in bed at night, trying to sleep, and it's the dearth of information. I'm not targeting. I know you guys you're up against it, but we're laying there trying to figure out, is this our last winter in our home, or are we going to be here for 2 or 3 more years? And when we finally get some answers, are they going to be, what are we supposed to be doing right now? We're just kind of laying here. It would be great to have a conversation, like you're saying, with whoever's running that particular end of the show.
And that's why we're going to be pushing the province for some funding so that you don't have to lie in bed at night losing sleep. To get back to the expropriation, it's an ugly, ugly, ugly process. I was involved in one when I worked for the city, and we don't want to go there. We do not want to go there. We want to work with you. That is our objective.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yeah, Jeff English. This question is for Captain. We met with him last week, Granby Road residents, discussing all the needs on our side of the river, and he was supposed to send out some information. I was just wondering when we could expect that, and I have a second part question after that.
So Michelle had a information package that she was set to deliver. I don't know if she got to it today, but she's got the survey and notes from the meeting. So she is set to that, either that's already happened or it's tomorrow morning on her schedule.
Okay, thank you for that. Second question, I'm somewhat confused here listening to Chris up there about going to the UBCM meeting and talking to the government officials about funding, and they're asking you that who's going to pay for this. I'm kind of, again, confused. I thought they said they had our backs, and yet when they're asking questions like that, I kind of is looking for a way out of not funding some of this stuff. What's your take on all of this?
I did remind one of the ministers that the Premier had said he has our back. And I don't think I needed to remind him of that, because when he asked how it was going to be paid for, I said, that's for you to know. You have our back. So that's the best we can do, Jeff. I can't give you a positive answer on that. Only that I think Councillors Hammond, Butler, and myself, and Roly and Graham and their administrator were with us at that meeting. We came away, at least I came away, and I think our council did, it's getting very positive as a result of the meetings that we had. We believed that we were heard, loud and clear.
Okay, again, I was sort of hoping to hear something a little more about funding from you after this meeting here. It just seemed somewhat discouraging to when a provincial official does ask you who's going to pay for it. You know, normally if they were going to pay for it, they'd be saying, well, we are, and we're going to move forward on this.
Well, perhaps I shouldn't get that comment to myself, but the thing is that we are doing everything that we can to support all of you. And we can't make promises. We will keep on them. We will keep at them. We will remind them of what the Premier said. And we will do everything in our power that we can to get the funding that we need so that we can do what we have endorsed and what we are advocating for. And that's all I can tell you now.
If I could just add to that, after we had a conversation with the Premier, he did say to us before we left that he had our back. And I made some comment about him writing a check right then and there. And he just kind of laughed, but it's got to go to the Treasury, and he's put that process through. So he has assured us that he's looking after our best interests.
Do you want to say something? Yeah.
I just wanted to add to that. I got the impression that the Premier said to us that we would hear something by the middle of this week. So I was hoping by today's Wednesday that we would have heard something. So I sent an email out to staff and talked with staff tonight and said, can we give him a call? You know, it's the middle of the week, maybe Friday at the latest. Let's remind him that he was going to get back to us. So I'm hoping we have our council meeting on Monday. I hope that somebody will have made that phone call by Monday.
I'm going to add a little bit to that too, and maybe a little less optimistically. I think the province has had our back in large part through this process. They have already paid millions and millions of dollars here in the community to help and been very receptive to our conversations. But I think we all need to be able to recognize that we're not going to get everything that we've asked for. We have, as you've seen tonight, there is a massive number of proposals in front of the province in front of various ministries. We are asking for a lot of help on a lot of levels, and we know it's not going to all be successful. So we don't know what's not going to be successful. And obviously, as elected representatives, be back to your question about taking no for an answer. That's another step in this process. But I think it's important for us to recognize that we're going to get a bunch of no's. We're going to get a bunch of yeses. We've already had a bunch of yeses, but we also going to get a bunch of no's. And we don't know what those no's are going to be, and we don't know what the next step is going to be when we get those no's. But I think it's important to keep that in mind.
Okay, it's Muriel from South Ruckle, one of my South Ruckle neighbors. We want to know when the bank is going to be armored. Any other South Ruckle people? Come on, Margie. This is freaking us out. We want the bank armored.
So, David, or maybe first David and then Jim, I don't want to pass it up, but you've probably got the most expertise in the site-specific work that's happened so far here, and then any comments about the section 11 stuff that we have.
Right, so we were looking at funding and just access issues, and there's a bunch of things that we're trying to work through to try to get something in place before the next project.
Long before the next freshette, because I saw what happened last spring. You wanted to armor it on May 5th. The freshette was May 10th.
It was later than May 5th, actually.
Well, okay, you started working on it, but I remember the 7 gentlemen walking by on the foreshore talking about it. It doesn't work that way. You've got to do it sooner, and it's going to cost more money if it doesn't happen sooner. And when I said I was going to start squeaking, I wouldn't be squeaking to you guys. I wouldn't be squeaking to people in government. I have started, but this is dead serious business. Why can't they recognize that it will cost more if they don't get it done now?
Yeah, I can't disagree with you there, but we had to follow our steps. We had to go through the engineering to make sure that we had that in place. The Emergency Operations Center was open full-time from May 6th. So we had the emergency, or the EAF in for funding to do the bank armoring. It was our second and fourth request into the province. They were approved, but by the time you get contractors and you get the material and that from May 6th, like you said, we were out there before getting the engineering complete, but we simply ran out of time before the freshette.
So I've been told that there is this understanding that, or an effort being made to get emergency funding earlier. Is any progress being made on that? Because it's really stupid to get emergency funding a few days before the emergency, in all cases.
Right. I think that one thing that the recovery team is definitely working on with the province to make sure that they know that we can't be in a situation that we were in this last year, and we have to be proactive. So, do we have an answer back from that yet? No.
Of course not.
And that piece, I can speak a little bit to that as well, because that's one of those conversations in the long term, but that we know is we need to see some changes. Paul alluded to some of this in terms of the ability in the province to mitigate or prevent the damage before it happens, as opposed to opening up the purse strings in the midst of an emergency. That was one of the conversations that, again, we reiterated. We need to explore that. But that is not those changes. I would be very surprised to see those changes in provincial level regulation or policy prior to the next freshette. Right? So we basically said, look, we need to have a thorough conversation with all the kind of key players from the province and local response people to be able to communicate, where we see ways to fix this system in a kind of a deep way for the future, but still to be realistic. Those changes are not going to happen before the next freshette, right? To have an avenue to have it more straightforward to invest in mitigation. I would also there was a flood and fire review that took place last winter, I guess. So, and it was completed just, I think, about the same time that we got into this flood. And that was one of the key parts of that conversation as it went on, was we need to be able to mitigate these events before they happen. That's been part of our, so if we had invested the amount of money that it's going to cost us to recover from this beforehand, we would have saved a lot of money.
I wanted to add in a couple specifics because I think Dave was being a little quick there. But the estimated cost for that armory is about $750,000. And basically what would need to happen is large rocks about a meter big would need to be put in right at the bottom of the bank and then built up, going from just south of Ruckle Beach down to the existing riprap. So the funding that was available in the spring was strictly emergency funding when there's that imminent risk of what happened. So it turns out we were right, there was imminent risk, and everyone saw what happened there. That funding stream is locked off by policy in emergency management BC until we get to, like you say, a few days before when it becomes that imminent risk. So our hands right now, unless everyone has 750 grand lying around, in which case we can hit go, right?
Do we have any pro athletes from some hockey players or rock stars or somebody that can dish it out for us?
Well, when we talk about access issues, there's structures, obviously, that are right on the bank now that are going to have to be dealt with if that's going to happen. So, as Kevin said, we have some challenges, but it doesn't mean we're not working towards a solution before the next freshet, but we'll do what we can.
What's the window of opportunity for being able to do that work in the river? Like, are you applying for Section 11 and is that not been granted because it's too late?
We applied for Section 11 to repair the dikes in the registered dikes in certain areas that we had some sort of failure, overtopping and washouts and boils and different things. So we have completed the work within the fish window, which is September 1st to September 30th in the fall here, to repair the dikes to the pre-flood condition. So they're not improved, but the repairs that we did under the emergencies have been removed and they have been replaced with engineers monitoring and engineered work, materials, all of that to pre-flood condition. So we do have a short window, but we're working with our Flint Row group there to see if there's an opportunity and what we can do to work within the rules.
Can we make a bay window?
Section 11 application should not be held up because the application should not be withheld because of the timing windows. You should always put your application in and have the people review it. The applications are not being held back from review because of the timing windows. The timing windows are the best operating period. There is always, depending upon what that project is, the opportunity to go outside if it meets the objectives of not harming the fish, the water. So don't stop, don't wait, and our review will not wait. Put it in. If it's an activity that cannot be done because of potential damage to the fisheries or the water, then the activity might be held up, but the approval will still be granted.
Can you work on frozen ground?
Depends on the application. I don't know.
Does it shift if you work on frozen ground and then thaws?
It would depend on the weather and winter we have. And there's a few things that we could look at. There's alternative measures, as Jim mentioned, that we would have to do if it's outside of the window to make sure that the fish are protected in that.
Yeah, because fish are more important than people, right?
name is Eric Lottery, and we lost 2 homes at the end of Darcy. They're just by the trestle, so when you're going by there, you'll see a modular home and a cabin. And my question is regarding the flood mapping that's being done in the regional district area. The first question is, how long will it be before we know what levels the levels could be at? Because we've been looking at raising one of the homes, and we know where the water level was, so we said, let's go 2 feet to be safe. But when I went to the regional district, they said, based on the flood plan levels that they had set out, and I'm sure it was a calculated flood level that they had picked up from some calculation. They were saying that we have to go another 4 feet higher above what we were going to do. And we said, well, that's not possible because the foundations would be, a totally different design. So when I looked at the water level, the floodplain was saying that we had to be at 513 above sea level. And we brought in a surveyor to do a geodetic elevation. And I found that level was out by a meter. So are we going to be having these flood level adjustments to actual versus calculated, like the 1 to 200 year?
It's a really good question. It's kind of a site-specific one that I can't answer without further details. In terms of the floodplain mapping and flood zone work, the original focus was just within the city, and we're in a process to extend it. We've obtained the aerial survey, the LiDAR data for the whole area in the Rural Grand Forks, Christine Lake area. The data hasn't come in yet, and they can't do the modeling work until that started. But just over the previous couple of weeks, the in-stream survey crews were out doing cross sections, just starting just upstream of the city and ending just upstream of your area. So the finish time for that project is actually in the new year, probably February to March by the time the final analysis is out. One thing that we've requested consideration of is setting an interim flood level based on the available elevation data that we have from the surveys and seeing if there's anything that can be updated since those 1991 flood maps. We know that there are some issues with the flood maps that were prepared with older survey data and older water data. So I think that we'll follow up on that conversation with the city building inspector and regional building inspector about exactly what data is needed, and we'll talk to the engineer about that shortly. Thank you.
Yeah, I would add to that, probably because I think on the whole, my understanding is that generally speaking, those floodplain maps for the areas outside of the kind of immediate vicinity of the confluence were fairly accurate in terms of their estimation of the flood levels, and I might be wrong on that, but that's my general understanding. You and I have either talked or emailed or something. I don't know where that was, but I know there, as Graham said, there's something peculiar about. I know that the numbers that you're speaking about in terms of this discrepancy between the actual flood level that we had this spring versus the survey elevations and so on. So that's a piece we have to look into. Another piece, I think, Graham is speaking about a particular project that the city had initiated well before the flood started. So there's a different project that we would have to be delivering, which would update those floodplain maps for the broader the rural areas, basically the older system. That's one of those pieces where it makes no sense to me that local government is responsible for this kind of thing as opposed to the province, especially in the delivery of the data. That it would be a joke for all of us to be paying to get data on all the little sections of floodplain. And so I don't know what the timeline is for the broader floodplain assessment. Getting the data in terms of elevations is not going to be the challenge. It's going to be getting the the work done to take all those data that the province will provide, and they have been supportive in providing, is turning that into a productive map that also identifies what is important to me is that we see out of that is also to be able to identify where those high hydrological risk properties might be as well. So not just to be able to say, these are the revised elevations, but to be able to say, here are areas that we recognize that are high risk of whatever, erosion or land softening or what. So the shorter answer is, I don't know when we're going to get those answers.
And actually, if anyone can instantly create a whole bunch more hydrological engineers and flood experts, there aren't enough of them around. That's another constraint.
Hello, I'm Margie McLean. I'm from South Ruckle, live on 9th Street, and I've got 2 letters in my purse. One for the city and a copy to Ray. But it's just about some of the big cottonwood trees that are in the bank, and the roots are exposed, and one has already fallen down. And I think probably if they feel that more of them fall, they're going to be taking a lot of the bank. And we did notice that there are, I believe the city has already done in the years past, have taken some of the trees down. But I used to work for the city of Greenwood, and we had a lot of trees in the park that we had to take down. They would only let us have someone cut off at a certain point, leaving the bottom trunk in the bank to save some of the bank. But anyways, I'll give you my letters.
Perfect, thank you. And I don't know if you could speak, David, to the kind of the tree bank process. That's just upstream of the Ruckle Beach there.
Sorry,
just upstream, just north of the Ruckle Beach. There's the trees. The roots are exposed, and there's a steep cut wall there now. I know it's flagged on our shoreline protection for the overall reach there, but I don't know if you can speak to anything about the tree stuff.
I just know that we lost probably 30 trees during the event, and as you said, there's many more exposed that we're looking and seeing how we can either shore them up or top them so that they don't have as much pressure on them, I guess, and try to keep some intact. It's going to depend on what we're doing on that riverbank, but we're also looking at doing a major planting this next year or two, just for future protection. So trying to re-stabilize or get as many cottonwoods on the riverbank as we can within the city limits. So it's something definitely on our radar and something we're working towards.
Thank you. Just one more question. It's not a question actually, and it doesn't involve me. It's someone we know, and I think I'm going to try and do this without crying. But people in North Ruckle, some people have insurance, and I think they're falling through the cracks. They're not receiving any money from insurance companies. And all I'm wondering is if there is, like, for the people that are dealing with mental health issues and the problems people are having, if any of these people have contacted you, because I really do think they need to have an ear. They feel like, you're not getting any help from flood relief because they've got insurance, and I just wanted to bring that up. It's got nothing to do with me.
Thanks, Margie. If I can just make a quick comment on that. Councillor Hammond and myself and our CAO met with the Insurance Bureau of Canada while we were at Whistler, and we had invited them to come to Grand Forks to make a presentation and to answer questions that you as homeowners and business owners may have with regard to variances in the adjuster's results. And I think, Graham, I don't know if you were going to ask the Insurance Bureau of BC through RBC to come as well, because I didn't know that the Insurance Bureau of Canada is not a regulatory board. They represent the insurance companies. And I don't know if anybody else was aware of that, but it was certainly news to me. But they did have some suggestions where if you're not satisfied, you can go and ask for another adjuster's report. So there's things like that. If you've got questions, I don't know when they're going to come, but we have extended that invitation, and hopefully sooner rather than later. And hopefully that will help allay some of the concerns that you may have.
If I can add to that too, I'm also worried about some of the downtown businesses, business owners that are not open and are not downtown on a regular basis now. Some of them that aren't open are still coming down and communicating and hanging out, and it's good because they're all having conversation. I'm worried about the ones that are at home, haven't had an income for 4 months. I worry about their mental health, the trauma that they've gone through, stability, lack of income, and not reaching out, and whether or not they're just going to give up and walk away. And I'm wondering also with the people that are in North Ruckle and some in South Ruckle, if it would be possible for on-the-ground outreach workers to do wellness checks and go door to door and just talk to people and just have a check-in and say, hi, we're here to help you. If you have any questions, is there anything we can do? And just find out. That would be a question for you from mental health. To find out if that's even possible, if we have the resources to be able to do that.
So just briefly, before passing, we did include in the funding requests that have gone in the summer for additional caseworkers to be working with Boundary Family Services and the wellness team, as well as outreach workers dealing with the housing requests. So we know that having some short-term support from agencies coming from the outside is a really good opportunity. I think timing's right for it right now, but it's an ongoing need. So whoever can take that message forward, there's a lot of people hurting right now.
Yeah, we're working, the part of that push is to get those case managers, but we also, in the meeting that we had today, talking to health, there was quite a conversation about the need for the outreach. So it was very positive, and I think we're going to be able to do that. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. I don't know, Darren, if you want to speak to this more.
So, as Margaret alluded to, the conversation we had with our partners in health today, we're very aware that there are people who are not reaching out for support, and it's incredibly difficult to do that. Graham has mentioned that there was that ask for the case management component. One of our health partners has actually begun the process of having a conversation with 5 nurses to see if we can partner to have 5 competent rotating teams to go out and do outreach. That was a conversation that occurred at 3 o'clock today. We're not likely to have any further momentum until at least a week from today, because there's the issues of WCD, accountability, and all those other things. It's not as easy as just walking through a neighborhood and knocking on people's doors, especially when it's multi-agency and multi-governmental. We still have to cross T's and dot I's, unfortunately. But we have definitely heard that loud and clear, and I would recommend for Councillor Hammond, if you have those business people, please talk to Jen. Jennifer brings that stuff to the team to kind of give us that impetus to find funding, to find ways to access that. And other people in the community, again, whether it's through Margaretta's program of Tough Talk or anything like that, if you have somebody that you are concerned about, if you have a fear that is, let's say it's a 5 out of 10 concern for their personal safety, don't hesitate. If you feel that somebody is at risk for personal harm, make that phone call to your healthcare provider, or if necessary to the RCMP. That is a responsibility that we all have to look after our neighbors.
Okay, thanks. I got 7 questions on this side, so I'm just going to let Emily jump in here real quickly, and then I'll go first.
I just wanted to revisit Dave and Nora, your questions surrounding the buyout. You're not alone. There are several question marks on my end as well, and my opinion is the province might as well have policies and procedures in place to help those eligible for a buyout. And I'm interested to bring into the same room the right people to answer those questions. So I'd be happy to champion that and let the community members know when this meeting will be, and we can start answering those questions. So, of course.
Yes, I'd like to ask, my question is, I'd like to, first of all, thank this team. They've done a hell of a job. Bang on. My question is, do you really think the government is going to spend $60 to $90 million in this town of 4,000 people to fix our problem? I really don't think so.
Well, yes, they said they have our back. And I'm going to suggest to you that they better spend that amount of money.
Or what? On those bases, I asked a question here to see about the Lotto Canada draws a lot of money out of this town. And they used to build hockey rinks galore. And is there a chance of them helping? Right now, I think Lotto 649, for example, is giving away $40 million at next shot. Well, can they not help this community rather than build another hockey rink?
I can address that. I think realistically, that would be a question for the province, not for us to be able to address. That being said, I think I'm fairly confident, as you've heard here, that we have made our needs very, very abundantly clear. The teams of people that have been out there initiating these surveys, collecting the data, and compiling them, that's very thankless work, and that's necessary for them to get to the point at the provincial level to recognize what that need is to make those decisions. So I think that the request has been very well put together and is now at that table. In terms of where the money comes from, I think that in most cases, the existing tools or the existing programs that are available to fund, they've been kicked into place so that regardless of whether they're working well or not, they're in play. The other avenues, that is very much a question that we can think creatively about and make suggestions, but that's not going to be our decision to make. To your comment, I think, yes, there are going to be tens of millions of dollars that the province spends to help this community. The question is maybe, is it going to be 50 or is it going to be 100, and what is gained or lost in that distinction, and how do we fight to make sure that we come out of this, as somebody was talking about earlier, as a more vibrant and healthier community, even if we know that a lot of us are going to suffer a lot of personal loss through this process, that we come out of it as a stronger community with that.
So we have about 10 minutes until 8 o'clock. So I think we'll have time for 3 more questions, unless people are banging down the doors, in which case we'll check back in at 8 and see if we can answer stuff and go from there. So it's probably 5 hands up right now. We'll see if we can squeak everyone in. 6 hands. Oh, 7 hands, because of course, Russell is the prerogative there, but
I just wanted to say too that we're advocating and we're pushing for everything that we can get for you. And we can't make promises, but we can tell you what we're advocating for and what we're going to do. And we're not going to take no for an answer very easily.
I'm glad to hear you're not going to take no for an answer. I have a couple of quick questions. Barry Jarvis is my name. I asked this question back at our first meeting back in July. It's regarding economic conditions going forward. And it involves our on-the-tracks train. Train is still not running. we have 3 major employers in the area that use it, Interfor, Pacific Abrasives, and Bogdan Brothers on the Midway. Are any of those businesses putting pressure on either the district or the city to get the train up and running?
Well, the specific part of the question about whether the businesses are applying pressure to the local government to get that going, not as far as I'm aware of, but I think that the urgency is very evident to us regardless of whether that pressure is there or not.
I can just speak, Barry, if you can hear me. It's Jennifer over here. I'm aware and certainly have been in discussion with some individuals in Washington State. The bulk of what the damage was, as I understand, there is significant damage on the Washington State side. And I've been in discussion with some of those businesses here that we know rely on that rail line. They seem confident that work was taking place. They indicated to me a couple of months ago they felt things were underway and looking good for September, October. My most recent discussion with them is now spring. So I am in contact with 3 businesses here that use the rail line that have significant concern about the impact of that. And we've measured that in our impact assessment, the losses that they've taken, the additional hit that it's cost them to continue to do business here in this region without that operating. But the repair piece of it, as I understand it, will fall on the Washington State side.
That I understand also. I guess the real question is, Jennifer, how long can these businesses, which employ a lot of people, continue to operate in this community?
Absolutely.
Without the train?
Absolutely. Interfor is giving me reassurance that they're doing okay on that side of things right now. It's the smaller,
Very good.
the smaller businesses I'm very concerned about.
Okay, so it's not a critical issue today.
I would think it's a critical issue. I think the complication is that the repair to it is on the Washington State side. Makes it difficult for us
I
to
did
push.
hear that the Omnitrax contract expires the end of this year.
Yes, I did that too. And that they were looking to obviously walk away.
They've been trying to 10 years ago.
Yeah, so I'm paying attention to it. It's been measured in the pieces that we put forward on our side as far as impact. And certainly if there's anything that comes down the line to me, I'll be letting people know through the flood recovery process about that.
Well, I see it as a critical issue sooner than later.
I agree. Thank you.
I think it's a pretty quick question. You're illegal. We have a rental house in South Ruckle. We did not qualify for DFA assistance because we don't charge enough rent. So we had to replace the water heater and the furnace. They were ruined. Now, do we qualify as a small business now to get some help other than DFA? I can come and talk to the person afterwards if you'd like.
Red Cross has their small business assistance program. I would encourage you to apply for that. DFA, from what I've seen in applications put in for rental, has been it's been unsuccessful. Yeah. So Red Cross is what we've got right now for rental opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you.
Don't stand up here. I've got three things I just wanted to talk about or ask questions about. The first one is Sept and Johnson Flats. We were talking about trees, and the trees fell down in a certain area, and I was just wanting to know if there is going to be any temporary measures of protection because of the increased risk from those trees that fell in. Is there anything that's going to happen into preparation for the next freshette? So, Johnson Flats.
So I have to say that we will not get everything protected prior to the next freshette. We are working on certain areas that, like we had to repair our registered dikes first, obviously. We have critical infrastructure concerns in South Ruckle there. But we're trying to prioritize and see what we can get done, what funding we have available, and trying to stretch it as far as we can, I guess. But we won't go to armor or protect everything by April or May of this coming year. So.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about this spring, and there was a number of properties that were affected by that one area that was coming in. Just wanted to check what was happening. The second thing was we saw an article about Housing Hub as an opportunity, and there were people on our council who were interviewed, and in there it talked about moving people out of the floodplain back into the floodplain, and I was wondering, are people thinking about moving people out of North Ruckle and maybe moving them into Johnson Flats? And if they're thinking of buying someone out in Johnson Flats who doesn't really want to leave, and say there isn't money to elevate their house, they don't really want to leave, but they get bought out, and then a developer comes with Housing Hub, develops it, and then those people don't have the opportunity to go back, Johnson Flats people, like, that would be sad. I mean, the North Ruckle people would take their home essentially, so I would ask for caution regarding that and feelings, and checking if you're going to buy out someone in Johnson Flats, check if there's any way they can stay, if their properties need to be developed, because that could be a bad situation for people. And can anyone comment on Housing Hub before I end on a more optimistic note, maybe?
Yeah. That was my quote.
Yeah.
What we're reading there, also to clarify, I'm not sure I caught all the nuances there, but to be clear, if the province agrees to fund relocation of somebody, that is not going to be a site that they are moved from that then gets redeveloped, right? Yeah, I cannot imagine any scenario where the province is going to offer to say, we're going to come to the table and help remove residences from a certain neighborhood, and then we're going to redevelop it and put people back in that neighborhood. Unless anybody has a different opinion. The scenario where that would happen is saying, we recognize, my interpretation of the decisions that have been made, for example, say, we recognize this is not a good choice for people to reside in this neighborhood. We need to get people out of that neighborhood. It's not going to be put people back.
So that reporter out of Vancouver, he came into a conversation I was having with a fellow from BC Housing Hub, and he misinterpreted what was said as far as I talked to him about the fact that we were having to relocate an entire community and turn it back into floodplain, not turn it back into development. So once we removed residences from an area, that property will be rezoned as non-residential. So you will not see any new development for residential happening where houses have been removed.
Okay, looking at Johnson Flats, southern Johnson Flats, some properties are built higher up that the regulations changed, right? And some were lower down. So I was thinking, was someone thinking of moving those out of those ones that were lower down, not elevating them and then bringing in a developer? Because if the whole, if the other ones stayed or higher up, you know what I mean? Because there's some...
I think it's good that the hydrological engineer's report identified a small section of Johnson Flats, which is in the northeast, not in the south. Okay. As those homes, they were under the criteria amount of water, so that's significant. I don't remember what the elevation of water was in those homes. That was the only area in that hydrological report in Johnson Flats where the recommendation was to try to pursue funding from the province to relocate those homes or relocate those people.
Okay, thank you. Then, and I don't know, this might be an optimistic note. So I was looking at the information under the Rural and Northern Communities Program, the fund that just came out on the 12th. And in there was a section about to be eligible, projects must meet at least one of the following outcomes. Green infrastructure adaptation, resilience, and disaster mitigation outcomes. Increased structural capacity and/or increased natural capacity to adapt to climate change impacts, natural disasters, and/or extreme weather events. I was wondering, is this something we can apply for some funding for protecting us from a future flood?
There were a lot of those kinds of announcements that took place last week at UBCM. That one, for example, from the Municipal Affairs and Housing Minister. And they very clearly are trying to identify all the avenues they have that will be able to assist us. So yes, is the quick answer to that, and that's only one of many.
Great, thanks.
Okay, I got a few up here, and I'll come back to that.
Yeah, I have a question. There seems to be a concern about getting people back in their houses. But I'm hearing stories that the insurance company or maybe the contractors will start 5 or 6 jobs, spend a few hours in a place and basically tie up the project, and nobody else can be able to do anything. Is there any way that you could put a stop to that? And these insurance companies that are dragging their feet, it seems they're waiting for the city to put a buyout out or whatever it is. I have a thought on that. What if you approach the insurance company and have them kick in 60% and the city or the province kick in 60%? The landowner would end up with 20% more, and both sides would have saved 40, but you're gonna get to the table and you gotta agree to do something about it sooner or later. The other thought I had, if I might, is with these homes that need to be warm, dry, and safe, and the basics just to get through the winter, maybe there's somebody who could coordinate a bunch of seniors, let's say, electricians, plumbers, whomever, that could contribute a few hours a day towards getting a home done, just to the basics to get through the winter.
Yeah.
Maybe if we could coordinate something like that, everybody could take in a couple of hours and tie up some of these hoses so people can move back in.
Both on the novel solution around 120%. Not sure if we can get about that, but a really serious question on the critical insurance needs. We've identified who to talk to, very people there, and also been talking with folks in the government who might be able to apply pressure on here. In Alberta, when there was issues with the insurers after the 2013 flood, the province successfully moved the bar and ensured that they were following correct policies and not causing hang-ups as you identified. There's also been some businesses that have been affected by going in to finish the work themselves when the insurers dropped the ball. So we recognize the issue and we want to resolve it right away. We've also seen, I heard from the building inspector this week that there's at least 50 homes that maybe it's 3 hours, maybe it's 20 hours worth of work to get it to that place where the insulation is buttoned up and they're not going to freeze their pipes and they're going to get back to their home. So we're looking at some solutions right now to get volunteer community as well as tradespeople and volunteers from outside of the community as quickly as possible so we won't be having some of those damages so we'll be able to get those houses as part of the insurance stuff.
Hi, my name is Nora and I'm from North Ruckle. And I was just wondering if the province comes back with a reduced number, will it be in the form of them deciding what areas the reductions are going to happen in? Or will it just be a reduced number and the flood recovery team will be deciding where the reductions happen, or a combination somehow?
The bottom line is risk, and so part of the work this winter that's already been undertaken is determine the areas at greatest risk and most challenging to protect over time. The recommendation from both NGOs about North Ruckle was pretty solid on that, but I think that if we have to phase when the funding is actually available to do the work, there will be a prioritization that happens and a sequencing. So if we get a partial now, partial later answer, or if we get an only partial type answer, That's definitely something that will be resting on the risk assessment work by the engineers, and the recovery team would work with the communities to identify, what's known locally for sure. There would be more consultation. Excellent question.
So it won't just be the province deciding where the reductions occur, it'll be every county. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dan Martin. I have a series of questions here about insurance. I'm one of the fellows in North Ruckle that had insurance, and one of the insurance companies disappeared. I've asked several times now some clarification, and I wanted to know what the communication with insurance agencies were. A lot of my questions have already been answered, but just wanted to point out that people that had insurance were denied financial assistance through any form, and that's where I'm at. My house hasn't been touched since the flood. So for 4 months, my house has been growing old, etc., and I have no place to live. I purchased a trailer. It's going to be a tough winter. I'm not getting any answers from my insurance company. They basically pulled themselves away from the situation, and I've heard from a lot of people they're not getting any help from the insurance companies right now, and it's causing a lot of stress for us. I needed some clarification on where we're going with this. And I guess one of the more important questions is somebody asked me if I get some kind of a buyout from my insurance company in lieu of repairs that they promised me. They were going to spend $180,000 repairing my house. So 2 weeks ago I thought I was going to be okay. Right now I don't know where it's at. If I get a buyout, I know it won't be $180,000, but is that going to be affecting my buyout down the road when the city turns around and offers me money? Because right now I'm sitting back, don't know where I'm going to be this winter, and everybody that got financial assistance, a lot of my neighbors have moved back into their homes, and my house hasn't even been touched because I was assured by the insurance company up until 2 weeks ago that they were going to fix me and have me back in my house sometime this winter. Thank you.
I don't have a good answer yet on this. It's one of the files that we need to have discussed with Insurance Bureau of Canada and the BC organization as well. We discussed this your exact scenario with one of the assistant county administrators in municipal affairs and housing, and he was going to refer it to some folks in finance about it as well. So we definitely recognize your short-term housing need as part of the study that Rachael and the team have been looking at, and want to support in every way that we can. That's what the immediate funding request is for. With regards to insurance buyout or insurance payouts and the longer-term buyout, they are independent. What you paid into your policy was your policy, and the request and the recommendation that's put forward versus ensuring that those are honored. The buyout process is uncertain and longer term, and if it enables you to get something put in place on your property that could be moved down the road after a property buyout, then that would be better than the situation that you're in now. So we'll continue advocating on that regard, and we'll be looking for some answers from the insurance industry in 2 weeks. I think we'll have some people here.
And to recap, my understanding is that the insurers should not be using any future land use decisions to slow or change their response to your plan.
They are.
We understand, we need to reiterate that, because that's what we then need to follow, where you need to pursue, right? And we're trying to figure out how we assist people in pursuing that. But that is the message that we have heard from the industry, is that's inappropriate practice, right? So that's the piece that we need to pursue, or somebody needs to pursue.
Can I just see a show of hands of how many people are having trouble with their insurance company? So I contacted IBC, and they have a mobile pavilion, and they have a commitment to coming into communities and fielding these questions that you have. I asked them to attend this meeting. They said that they couldn't. with such short notice, but they have said that they will come to the next community meeting. So I will try my best to hold on to that commitment. And if you would, on that piece of paper is my email and my phone number. Feel free to let me know. Email's best probably, but what's happening or not happening with your insurance company. And then that way I can let them know what to expect and what to come prepared to answer. Hope that helps.
Okay, I've got 3 more questions on this one.
Hi, my name is Debbie. I'm from Ruckle. I don't want to leave my home, but it's going to happen. What I'm wondering is, once we get our buyout, or if we get our buyout, that money is going to be used to pay off our mortgages, and if there's anything left, use as down payment for someplace else. Is there going to be any help or funding with moving costs, anything like that? Because these costs or expenses are not something that we're prepared to have in our lives at this time. And there's no money set aside for those expenses.
Yeah, that need has been recognized by the recovery team. One of the projects this winter is working on the replacement housing program, medium-term housing plan, and looking at how many people have different levels of resources available after a potential buyout, where are they at, and how can available supports, whether public or public-private partnerships or other resources that are available to help meet them where they're at, get them in a new situation. If the house was not in a condition to be moved, for instance, is there an opportunity to provide something akin to a starter home that can go on over time, or is there an opportunity for land development and servicing costs to be fronted so that it's an easier start? We're looking at all those options, and there will need to be some more consultation with those areas this winter. So Emily is going to be a key part of that housing plan, as well as colleagues at Urban Matters. So definitely that they'll be wanting to get in touch with you with those questions.
Good evening, my name is Gordon Shaw from Johnson Flats. Just a word of encouragement. I did have insurance on my house and sustained some minor damage to it, but what I found in the conversation with my insurance company today is you gotta stay on it, okay? They're not gonna sit there and open their wallet and just allow you to sit there and pick money out of the pocket. They're going to want to be justified of why you have a loss, what your loss is, and I went over mine today, and the guy said, you know what, we'll cover 80%. So, you know, there is encouragement out there, but it's not a free program, okay? You got to work at it if you want it, go after it.
Yes, thanks again. I got questions directed to our city council members here tonight. I want to fast forward to July 1st, 2019, and that's the property tax due date for our property taxes. As we're all aware, a number of homes were damaged in Grand Forks here, and again, maybe Chris or Ms. Hamilton could shed some light on this, but assessments will be affected this year on property taxes, and I'm concerned that those that may not have been flooded will have an increase in, well, not an increase, well, maybe there will be, in assessment. Basically, what it boils down to is the assessment is taken, or assessment roll is taken for all properties in the community, and then the city develops a budget against that and then puts a tax dollar figure towards those assessments. Those that are suffering from loss, which a lot of people will have a lower assessed value, I believe, next year. Others that will maintain or maybe go up because it's artificially crazy market. Mr. Fate might be able to bring up some numbers on that too. What's concerning me is residents that have properties now, what's going to happen with them as far as taxes are, because we are going to be looking, the city's got to get the money from somewhere to run. Does it mean those that are left that didn't suffer the damage will be paying the lion's share of the tax bill for next year? Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Jeff. That's a good one. I've just been advised that the Assessment Authority will be at our next.
Meeting with us.
Oh, they will be meeting with the flood recovery team this next week. Yeah, and staff. With regard to property taxes, that would be an issue that council would have to debate once the budget is set, and how we want to distribute the burden, the share of the burden. The city can determine which classification of property is going to be what percentage based on there's a formula that goes with that. And that is something that the next council is going to have to deal with. I cannot give you any assurances on how that's going to be, but I would hope that there will be some consideration so that it's not an unfair share for those of us whose property were not impacted, and taking into consideration the needs of the community. So, that's really the best answer I can give you at this point. I can't give you any assurances one way or the other.
Okay, thank you. Is there any programs from the provincial government that can help out in disaster situations like this when it comes to property taxes for those that are in the Grand Forks area? Can we see any money from that?
Not that I'm aware of. The only thing that the province does is the homeowner grant, provincial homeowner grant. But with respect to the grants for property tax relief to support the operations of the city, I'm not aware of any that are out there.
And I would go check the Services BC to follow up on some of those pieces because they have the right answers for some of those avenues as well.
The other thing too, Brad just reminded me that if you own your home and you're over 65, you can defer your property taxes. There's an application, go in and see the tax collector, which is Juliet Rose at City Hall.
Or 55%.
Is it over 55?
55, and they also be disabled, and you have all
right, yes, thank you.
I was thinking back then.
No, it's been a while since I've been in that position. But there are options available if you are over 55, own your home, or you have other considerations, health issues.
Yeah, the deferment, I understand, and the only thing is, one way or another, those property taxes will still have to be paid sooner or later. It's just a matter of, what I'm concerned about is not having an unfair burden of having, let's say, a property tax this year of X number of dollars, and then see it go up by 50% or even 100% because the city is in a financial situation that is created due to disaster.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah, I think trying to meet our obligations with the budget is going to be a challenge. Property taxes are going to be reduced, revenue is going to be reduced substantially in 2019 and 2020 as a result of the lack of property values. We're either going to have to, the new councils need to have to look at cutting capital projects, but I can see that Grand Forks is going to be putting in grant requests for many more years to come, and that's just going to be the process that we're going to have to go through, is continually looking at grants.
Since Kevin's up here, does that mean that I get to ask my question? I will be very quick, and I won't even ask the question. It was going to be a question for Margaretta to just clarify on some of these posters and on the little poster or postcards. There on the back of them, and if there are posters up here, there's a little chart there of kind of the emotional well-being it's a FEMA graph, I think, about the kind of peak and trough of disillusionment in the process post-recovery. And I think it's a really valuable thing for everyone to have a look at and maybe speak to Margareta after the fact, or speak to any of our wellness team about that. That's all. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for sticking it out. We are a few minutes after 8, but I think we got through a lot of good questions tonight again. Les did remind me that not only can you see these meetings on his website, but that we can put them up on the flood recovery website. So we will be starting to do that. So if you know anyone who missed the meeting and they are looking to see what went on, they'll be up on there probably later this week, but beginning of next week, if not later this week. And of course, you can always go to gftv.ca if you missed out in the meantime. Also broadcast there all of our council meetings, so don't miss the fun. Come see your council in action. We will be continuing on with community meetings through the fall, although we will be stopping the every second week schedule. So stay tuned for the date of the next meeting. It won't be in 2 weeks, but we will be putting out in the newspaper, in the e-newsletter, on Facebook, on the website, when the next meeting is. And we will be also looking at rooms that have less of a stage, so we can encourage more of our team leads to come on up and have some fun. And also so that we can have more of a discussion instead of the whole, hey, we're up here delivering the information. So stay tuned on location and timing, but we will be continuing the meetings. And I'll put the last call out there, because I always try to end these meetings and then someone says, but wait, I want to say...
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.